can you imagine this scene? It's the kind of situation that you younger men might be involved in. Did you notice one detail? The two were excited at the news or report, and what did they do? They ran, but it says side by side. So you can see it happening. Maybe you'll be running with Daddy to see who got there first. Well, actually it was John who got there first. Maybe you can imagine why. Who was the younger? John. So Peter was already married, a married man. John got there very quickly, but he didn't actually go in first, and probably that was out of courtesy, because he knew that Peter was the first. He had been made the rock, the head of the church, the column, the pillar, the one on which the Lord was going to build. And so it was right that he should have that position of being, as it were, the first officially to recognize, confess, and then proclaim. So humbly John waited, and then calmly he went in, and it just says serenely, he saw and believed. Now we have a few details. They could pass us by, but they're not there without a reason. We have these, what they call wrappings in that new translation. They're folded, they're tidy, there's no chaos in there, but there's also this napkin, the bit that was over the head. Now, that's important for history, because the shroud, of course, has been the centre of attention, especially actually in recent times, but we tend to forget the other bit, and it's around too. It's in the north of Italy, Monopolo, and it is that napkin which, if juxtaposed on the other, is of the same dimensions exactly, but one gets the impression that it's more or less that of the beam of the exploding risen face that we have there. And hence we don't have that element of now a disfigured face covered in blood, and it's the element, it would seem, of what have imprinted itself on that by now cleaned up face. There's also another case in the tradition of the early church. It's what went to King Agbar in Edessa. We have two accounts in the Gospel, or rather only one in the Gospel itself, where the Lord is said to have written. It's when he writes in the sand, when this adulterous woman is presented to him in John chapter 8. We don't know what he wrote. But the other, it's not in the Gospel, but it's in an unbroken tradition. It's when the king of Edessa, Agbar, sent messengers to the Lord to inquire, and he sent a letter. And according to that ancient tradition, the Lord did write a word back. And also a strange thing came. When this was opened, the face of the Lord was on it, and that's been kept there in that eastern part of the church. The Magdilion, on which much Eastern iconography is based. The other is what was venerated for a long time in Rome, the Veil of Veronica. Now, something happened some centuries ago and it got lost. A tradition has it that it actually wasn't lost but appeared there in another point of the East where it's venerated. All that to say that we have these clues as to what the Lord looked like, and we have now, recently, through modern science, reproduced by reversing what we have there on this negative, as it were, the Holy Shroud, in 3D, not only the face of the Lord, but the whole body of the Lord, as close as modern science can manage it. So we have reconstructed, and it's a very dignified Christ that we have. Now, I remember one time when growing up, one of the good Benedictines who was preaching one day in church came out with this. We, for the most part, do not actually expect to see a miracle. I thought, well, I'll take note of that, but I don't know whether it's actually true. I was number 15 at the time, but then, as the years have gone on, I've questioned that. Because one is, especially in the Catholic sphere, exposed to the supernatural quite a lot. I've even got one in my mobile phone there. My screensaver is that actually of a miracle. It's a lovely travelling family who comes here, but the mother was quite sterile and she couldn't have children, and so somebody said to them, go over to St Winifred's Well. And the result I've got on my phone, she conceived not once but twice, lovely little children. And that happens quite a lot to most travelling people. They go there and they conceive. That's an unbroken tradition. In fact, that's the one in the British Isles they could never stop because of the miracles. Even the Protestants went there. And miracles go on. Therefore, it's that same power. Now, with regard to what we see around us, it would seem, if we take it on human terms, that Christ, his church, his people, his truth, his rights are on the losing side. That, as it were, the enemy of grace, Satan and his minions, are gaining power, gaining control. And one gets echoes from people who come who are depressed and don't understand what's going on, why the Lord is allowing this to happen. Well, I'm not so sure. I have a feeling that what's going to happen is this. The Lord is allowing things to go this far, knowing that eventually there's going to be, for his greater glory, a huge, massive reversal. We don't know when and how, but the Lord is Lord. And even though it would seem that the fallen angels, and therefore those that they influence, have power, they're getting agitated because they know it's limited in time. Indeed, we know that this strange mystical experience that Leo XIII had over a century ago, when he heard this conversation between Lucifer and God, the devil needed permission. Therefore, he is always under authority himself and knows that his time is limited. Reading here and there, I find that a constant emerges. When human means are limited in the people of God, then he himself steps in, the miraculous. It'll probably be your case somewhere along the line. If you're young, you'll live long enough to see this happening. Among many, many cases, you've got things like this going on in the annals of sanctity. Saints who are doing the work of God and had no human means. One thinks of the number of times that, for instance, in the life of the Cure Vase and other people like that, you had multiplication of food. But then you've got other spectacular things, and they're all over the lives of the saints. Take, for instance, those who preached the gospel in distant lands, or re-evangelized in lands where it was weak. You have the great preacher Francis of Paula, François de Paul. He was actually an Italian, and he wanted to go over to the extreme south of Italy to preach there. So he got to the port and wanted to cross to Sicily. And he had no money. A good Franciscan, or a good minim actually, he was depending on divine providence for everything. So he just went up to the boatsman who was about to cross to Messina and asked if, for the charity of Christ, he would give him a place, because he had no money. He said, I'll give you a place, but I actually need the fare. Well, he took this as an indication that he wasn't at all to be offended. He was very courteous, the saint, and just then went into prayer. He buried his head on the seashore and felt an impulse. He got up, took off the mantle that was shielding him, his outer garment, and, having blessed it, stood upon it and held a part of it up against his staff in such a form that it was by now a sail. And this is not a myth, it's true. He actually stood on it and was propelled by a favourable wind in this sail, which is actually his mantle, on the water from A to B. And the boatsman was staggered, he was amazed, he was frightened, and there were two other people with him. They were trying to catch up with him. One was a priest and the other was a brother, if not a priest as well. There were two in the religious life, and they couldn't catch up with him. Eventually, people on the other side of Messina could see him coming, and they were amazed at the spectacle, so they all ran towards him, but he was diverted by another providential wind to a quieter spot, to an island off the mainland, and there, to commemorate the miracle, which is well documented, they built a monastery of his order, and it was named, hence I mention it on this day, the Monastery of the Holy Sepulchre, because it's the same power of the one who rose from the dead, who also wanted the word to spread and was not short of means in doing so. So we have power on our side. We notice, however, that the courteousness of the saint was never violent, and he never reacted on the same terms. The power of God is gentle in its forcefulness. We don't need ever to raise our voice, because if we do, it means that we're getting nervous. Those who raise their voice are afraid of something. We have the truth, we have power, we have the risen one, we have the Alpha and the Omega, who has the last word anyway. All we have to do is our bit, knowing that he's backing us up if we truly honor.